numbers on the bottom of your screen. John Perkins, welcome very much to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be with you today, Riz. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to ask off. I know you've answered this question many times. It's one of the key ones everyone asks you, first of all. But for the sake of our viewers around the globe, explain to us, give us a brief definition of an economic hitman.
Well, I think it's fair to say that in the last several decades, we economic hitmen have managed to create the world's first truly global empire. And we've done it primarily without the military. For the first time in history, an empire has been created primarily without the military through economics. We work many different ways, but perhaps the most common is that we will identify a third world country that has resources our corporations covet, like oil, and then arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sisters. But the money doesn't actually go to that country. Instead, it goes to our own corporations to build big infrastructure projects, power plants, industrial parks, ports, things like that, that will benefit a few rich people in that country, as well as our corporations, but don't really help the majority of the people, the poor, who are not connected to the electrical grid, or if they are, they only use a couple of light bulbs. However, they are left holding a huge debt, and the whole country has this debt, and it's such a big debt by intention that they can't possibly repay it. So at some point, we economic hitmen go back to that country and say, listen, you owe us a lot of money, you can't repay your debt, so give us a pound of flesh. Sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies, or vote with us on the next critical UN vote, or send troops in support of ours to someplace in the world like Iraq. Right. When we fail, which doesn't happen very often, but on the few occasions when we fail, as I failed in Panama with Omar Torrijos, for example, then the jackals come in. And these are people who will either overthrow governments or, as they did in the case of Omar Torrijos, assassinate the leaders that we haven't been able to corrupt.
It's interesting
so in
as
that
well.
way, we've really created this empire.
John, I was going to say, it's interesting as well. You say that it's not necessarily the governments who send out the jackals, that those are now the sort of assassins, the hitmen. They're really the product of private companies now, so governments can keep their hands clean.
Yeah, including economic hitmen like me. I was interviewed, I was really recruited by the National Security Agency, a government organization, but in the end I worked for a private corporation, Charles T. Main out of Boston, and that's been the case for several decades, because it was discovered quite a long time ago that to have CIA agents doing this sort of thing, or other government agents, was just too dangerous. If they got discovered, it was obvious that it was the government's fault. But if you use private people like me, consultants and private security firms to do the assassination type of work, then if they get caught, you can always just blame the corporations. You can say it was a rogue corporation, whatever, and the government is not implicated.
Tell me about the word corporatocracy that you use in the book as well.
Well, you know, as I've said, we've really created a truly global empire. And an empire needs an emperor. An emperor is someone who's not elected, doesn't serve a limited amount of time, and also doesn't really report to anyone else. And it's obvious that the President of the United States doesn't really have that role, but we do have the equivalent of that in a group of people who run our biggest corporations, and I call this the corporatocracy. Now, this isn't a conspiracy theory. These people don't have to get together and conspire to do illegal things. They all are driven by one big motive, and that is to create huge profits for a few wealthy people who basically own their corporations. And in order to make that happen, they all know basically what they have to do. They don't have to conspire to do it. And they are not elected, they don't serve a limited term, and they basically report to no one, except maybe their boards, but they are on each other's boards, so they really take care of each other in that way too. They truly behave as a collective emperor would.